Hey guys, today I thought I would show you how you can get started with Create React App, get it up and running on your machine, deleting the files that you don't need so you can get started with a clean work environment as quick as possible. Okay guys, so if you head over to Google and type in Create React App, the first result you would get is the documentation for Create React App. Let's head into that, and if you scroll down a bit, you'll see the section for Create React App. You'll also see that we need to have a node version greater than 8.1 and an npm version greater than 5.6. So to get this, let's head over to nodejs.org. Here you can download the LTS version that includes a node version 12 and npm version 6. So that should be more than enough. When you're done with that, you can head over to your code editor or your terminal. I use VS Code and I have an empty folder open here. So I'm going to start off by doing npx create react app, and then I'm going to name my project. So it's my app. This can take a while, so I'm going to skip this and be back when it's done. There we go, the installment is now done. As you can see in the terminal here, we get the next steps as well. So they want us to cd into the new directory, which is my app. And from here we can run npm start. This will start up a development server that updates live when we make changes. So this is a great place to play around and develop your app. So here's their basic starter app. It's now up and running. So I'm going to open the folder that we got. This folder includes some new folders and some new files. Don't be alarmed though, there's a bunch of stuff that comes with Create React App that we don't really need to get started. So I'm going to trim this down a bit. Some of these things are made for making progressive web apps, for example, that needs your app to be able to work offline. I'm going to remove all that stuff so it's easier for you to get started working on a clean workspace. We can start off with node modules. Node modules is the folder that is holding all the files for our dependencies. It's a huge folder and we will not make any modifications to this folder directly. So just know that it's there and forget that it exists, if that makes sense. To understand where node modules comes from, we have to talk about package.json. This is the file that keeps all of our dependencies, and when we install a new project, this is the dependencies that is being installed. And all of the files for the dependencies is being put into the node modules folder, and that folder is being generated when we install a new project. And because node modules is being generated when we start a new project, we don't have to carry it around, we don't have to push it to GitHub or anything like that. We can just pull down the code in the package.json, run npm install, and it will regenerate the node modules with these dependencies within. So because we don't want to push this to GitHub, we also get this gitignore file. This file tells Git which files and which folders not to include when we're pushing to GitHub. And as you can see, node modules is one of those folders. Next up, I want to talk about the public folder. The only file in here that we care about is the index.html file. What's special about this file is that it works as a template. By that I mean that it has a div with an ID of root, and inside of this div we are going to inject all of the content that we create in our React files. So when we write JSX, which is the markup that we write in React, it's going to be injected into this div. So this div is going to serve as the parent of the whole project. There's some nice comments in this file. I recommend you guys to read them and understand how this file works. There's some links in this file that we don't need. These links are related to creating a progressive web app. We will not be covering that today, so I'm going to remove these two links and the comments that they come with. And those links were referring to these images and this manifest.json. So I'm going to delete those because we don't need any of these. There we go. I can save the index. Everything works. We don't need robots.txt either. This is if you want your project to not be crawled by Google or any other search engine, you can put that in here. I'm removing that. So that's it for the public folder. We have our fav icon. We can keep that. That's the little icon that is up here in the browser tab. Next one is the source folder. This is where the magic happens. This is where we're going to write all of our JSX, all of our styles, and all of our logic. There are some files in here as well, though, that we're going to remove. The service worker, for example, that's related again to creating a progressive web app. So I'm going to delete that. The app is going to crash. That's because in index.js, we are importing service worker and we don't really have that anymore. So I'm going to remove the references to that one. And everything should go back to normal. The tests I'm going to remove as well. That is app.tests and the test setup. So now we're left with 2 JS files, 2 CSS files, and 1 SVG logo. So app.js is essentially just a normal JavaScript file. We are using ES6 JavaScript import and export. We are using a function. What is React here though is that we are returning what's called JSX. It looks like HTML, it acts like HTML, but it's not HTML. The difference is that we can put in JavaScript here in the curly brackets directly into our markup. And there are some words that have changed from HTML to JSX. That is, for example, class. Before that was class, now it's class name. That's because class is a reserved word in React. And as you can see here as well, the logo here, we are importing logo from logo SVG and we are essentially storing it in a variable. And we're putting that variable directly into our markup within these curly braces. And as you also can see, this markup is exactly what is being shown in the live website. So if I remove this p tag here with the text and hit save, that's going to be removed. So how is this markup making its way into the index.html within the root folder that I told you? Well, we are exporting this app, this function that's returning JSX. And instead of index.js, we are importing app from app and we are injecting it into the root div using React DOM.render. So to make JSX work, we have to import React. But to make React DOM work, to make this render function work, we need to import React DOM as well. This will be the only file that we import React DOM to. The other files are going to be components that are going to return JSX, so they only need import React from React. Here you can see we get React strict mode by default. We don't need that, so I'm going to remove that and hit save. Now you can see we are injecting the app component which holds our JSX into the root div of the HTML document. Now let's talk about some styling. Index.js, it's a global file. It's not a component, so it's going to live here directly inside of the source folder. So now let's talk about some styling. Index.css holds our global styles. This is margin resets, fonts, and stuff like that. App.css holds all the CSS and styling for the app.js component. So this is how we usually work with components and styling in React. So this is how we normally use components and styling in React. We have a style sheet that is scoped to a certain component, and those are often named the same thing. So if I had a header component, I would have a header.css for that header.js file. This makes it much easier to manage large scale projects. But right now, all the files just lays right under the source folder, which is not ideal. We want to create some kind of structure. So I'm going to create some folders here. It's going to be components, This is for our JavaScript files. I'm also going to have a styles folder. This is going to be for all the styles, and inside of the styles folder I'm going to have a components folder. So this is for the styles for the components, and within styles we're going to have the global styles, for example index.css. So let's start off by moving some things. The app will break. That's because we are importing index.css from this directory right now. But if I move index.css inside of styles, it's going to break because we are not checking inside of styles. There we go, and it's back. I'm also going to do the same thing with app.css. I'm going to put that inside of styles. The app will break going into this function, or I mean this component, sorry. And I'm going to do into styles.app.css. We don't have any components yet. We only have this one file. We also have an image here. What I like to do is create a folder called assets, and within here I'm going to put the image. The app will break again. So that's app.js. There we go. And now it looks a little bit cleaner. We don't have mixing types of files here. We have our global app component and index component. And inside of styles, we have our global styling. And in here, we're going to have component styles, and we're going to have JSX components out here. So I'm going to start off by making some components. I want header.js. I also want footer.js. And lastly, I want main.js. So for styling for these components, I would go into styles, into components, and add header.css, footer.js CSS, and again main.css. So this is how my idea of structuring is. The styles folder is supposed to reflect everything that's happening in the source folder. So if I had another folder in source called pages, for example, I would also have another folder called pages in styles. Keep in mind, this is my recommended way of structuring your folders. There is many other ways to do this, but I do recommend that you start with some type of structure just to get used to working in that way. So to get started with our new components, I'm going to remove the content within the app component. I'm going to use the app component to gather all my other components, so we just have to inject the app component into our HTML in the end. So I'm going to remove the header and the class of app, like that. We now get nothing. I'm going to remove the logo as well. We don't need that. And assets, we can just keep the file, it doesn't matter. Oh, actually, let's just delete the file as well. So I'm going into components, going into header.js, and I'm gonna import React first, because we need to import React to make JSX work. So that's import React from React, right? Now that we got that done, I'm going to create our arrow function. It's going to be const header equals. It's common practice to name our custom components with a capital letter. This helps us differentiate between our components, pre-built components, and original HTML elements. In this function, we are going to return some JSX. We're going to return a header. So that's the original HTML element that we talked about. And in here, I'm just going to say, hey, from the header. And we have to remember to export this. So we have to export default header. And if I import this component into app, let's try that. Import header from components header. There we go. Now we have access to the header, and I can go in here and I can say header. There we go. Hey, from the header. So we're going to do the same thing with our footer component. This is not the one I want to copy. I want to copy this one. Now I just copy the header component into the footer because they're going to be very similar. It's just going to be called footer instead. And this is going to be a footer component, footer element, sorry. And we're going to say hey from the footer. So again, I'm just going to copy this into the main, change the name and the default export to main. I'm going to change the elements to the main element. There we go. We have exported it. We have everything. So now we can just import those as well. That is main footer from main and from footer. I'm going to take those in here as well. So it's going to be main. It's going to be footer. Now you can see we have hey from header, hey from main, hey from footer. Everything is injected into the HTML. Remember, this is the app component. It's now gathering all my other components into one div, and it's going to push it out as one element into the root. And this is very important. It has to be one element. So what happens if I move one of these outside of this div? The app is going to crash. So now this is not considered one component because it's not wrapped in one component. One way to bypass this without using a div in React is that, we can just make fractionals like this. So this will now act as one component. So imagine that you have multiple pages. If we wanted to have the same header and the same footer in every page, the easiest way to do this would be to create a layout component that includes the header and the footer in every page. So I'm just quickly going to show you how we can do this. And if you go into source and create a new folder and call it containers, inside of containers we can make something called a layout. We can make layout.js. This is again going to be a new component. This one is going to return the header and the footer. Remember to import these. In the middle here, we are going to return the props.children. And then we are going to get props from here. Remember, this has to be one element, so we're going to make the fractionals again to make this one component. There we go. And now we have a layout component that always includes the header and the footer. So what is props, you may ask? Props is the way we are passing down data from component to component. So if I now go into app.js and I remove all this, I just want the layout. Oh, that's right, I forgot to export this one. So it's export default layout. And now I can access layout here. I'm going to remove all the other imports because we don't need those. Remember, the footer and the header is now in the layout. So now you can see I'm just rendering the layout component and I get both the header and the footer. So what is the props.children? Props.children is everything that is inside of layout. So I can say, hey, this is props.children. And it's going to show up because it's being passed to the layout component as props.children. So again, props is everything that we have access to in this component. I could also give this layout custom props. I could say title equals hello, I'm the layout. And then in the props object, I will now have access to something called props.title. So if I go in here and say I want props.title, if I take this into a p tag like this, to demonstrate what props is, I can do console .log props. If you go in here, inspect, and we check the console, we get an object. Right now you can see that we have access to the children and we have access to the title. I could pass this on further. I could say that I wanted to give the title to the header. Title is equal to props.title. Now the title that I get from the app into the layout is now getting passed on to the header. So in the header I can access props and I can say, hey, from props.title. Hey, from the I am the layout. It makes no sense, but
that's what you get.
Using a layout component like this to get the same header and footer in different pages, that's good practice and saves you a bunch of code. So let's connect the CSS files to our components, import, and when you're importing the CSS, you're just going to import it to the file so we can access the CSS. And my CSS is within styles, it's in components, and it's in header.css. Give my header a class name of header. Gonna head into here, I'm gonna say header. I'm gonna give it a width of 100 view width, a height of 60 pixels, and you know what, I'm just gonna give it a pink one. So here you can see the header. Everything is wrapped in the layout, and I didn't give the layout its own CSS file. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to go into styles, open a new folder, name it containers. In here, I'm going to have a layout.css. So again, this is the way I like to structure the styling and the JS components. I'm going to import that one. So import styles containers and layout.css. I am going to give the layouts a div so then I can style it. I'm going to give it a class name of layout. I'm going to back into the layout.css file, and I'm just going to give it some padding, 4% or something. Makes it look a little bit nicer. Now if you wanted to host this somewhere, this would not just work out of the box because it has to compile first into a build folder that contains JavaScript that the browser can read. So what we're going to do, we're going to test that out. We're going to exit out of this development server, and we're going to write npm run build. This will give us the compiled build folder with everything we need. So if you wanted to host this somewhere, this is the folder that you are pushing to the hosting service. I'm going to show you quickly how you can get it up and running with Netlify. So if we jump over to Netlify here, I already have an account, so I'm just going to log in, but you would have to sign up first. You can sign in with GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, or just your email. So once you're in here, I'm going to show you how easy this is. You can just scroll to the drag and drop thing. I'm going to open this folder and find the build one that we just created by running npm run build. I'm just going to drag and drop it over here. You see Netlify gives me this weird URL. So there it is. There's our React app live on the web for free, super quickly. So there you go. Now you can use this as your boilerplate and your starter if you're going to experiment with React projects. It's not the prettiest app you've ever seen, but it's a live app. You can make changes, use this as your starter when you're learning React. It's much easier to learn something when you have a work environment that you're comfortable with. If you have a lot of files and folders that you don't understand what's going on with, it's not going to help you out. If you want to learn how to set this up with continuous deployment, check out my video on that topic in the description below. Also, if you have any questions about this, comment it below, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.
Peace.